Samsung went all out with the Fold earlier this year, so all eyes were on Google to see if the Pixel 10 Pro Fold could keep up. Hi everyone, Ta here. So at first glance, it doesn't look all that different from last year, but the 10 Pro Fold has a handful of quality upgrades over last year. Unfortunately, none of those upgrades are flashy though, and normally that'd be fine, but when your biggest competitor just got a serious glow up, comparisons are hard to avoid. So let's dig in. There's a lot to cover. Side by side, the Pixel is thicker and heavier by about 30 grams. That's like carrying the Fold 7 plus a couple of AAA batteries. Doesn't sound like much, right? Because it really isn't. You notice it, but it's not as drastic as some are saying. That said, the Samsung has that wow factor for sure. The cover screen is just a touch wider than the Galaxy, but that little extra space actually makes a noticeable difference when typing. I just find myself making fewer typos, and for those with bigger hands, you'll probably prefer the Pixel's typing experience more too. Now, if you like to use the always-on display or read a lot of static content like articles or ebooks, the Samsung cover display is actually more efficient since it can drop its refresh rate all the way down to a single hertz. Even just watching YouTube videos, I found the Pixel cover screen sips a little more battery. One thing I noticed in dark rooms, the Pixel's cover display can sometimes show a little banding or a grayish glow instead of true black. The Fold 7, by comparison, stays nice and pitch black. That said, the Pixel wins on viewing angles. Tilt the Samsung slightly and you'll see a green tint, while the Pixel keeps its colors pretty true. So yeah, both screens have their quirks. Open them up, and both phones are rocking 8-inch displays with slightly different aspect ratios. The Pixel's a little wider, the Samsung's a little taller. One thing I do appreciate is that Samsung pre-installs screen protectors on the main display, whereas Google doesn't. The Pixel's main display can get brighter. Both are more than bright enough for outdoor use, even in direct sunlight. What's a bit surprising is that HDR content on the Galaxy actually appears brighter. I'm not sure if that's a tuning choice by Google or if it's for efficiency, because on paper, the Pixel should be brighter. But honestly, brightness isn't everything. A lot of the time, I actually prefer the Pixel's more balanced, natural look over the eye-piercing brightness of the Samsung. One thing that hasn't changed for Google though is the crease. It's still noticeable, especially next to the Fold 7, which has done a much better job at minimizing it. What's cool is the Pixel actually lets you play games in both orientations, probably because of its wider aspect ratio, while the Galaxy locks you into landscape only when gaming. Not a big deal, but being able to jump in and out of games without having to rotate the phone around is kind of nice. I do like the position of the punch hole camera on the Pixel way better. It doesn't get in the way when you're watching videos. What's not so great is how low it sits on the screen, forcing a thicker status bar. And you really notice it in tabletop mode. If I use it like this, I have to deal with the chunky status bar cutting into videos. But if I rotate it and use the other half of the screen, now it's wobble city and the phone just won't sit flat. Thankfully, you can use the cover display in tense mode, which is what I end up doing most of the time. Samsung does the tabletop mode, or flex mode as they call it, really well. It auto-hides the status bar, plus they dim the lower half of the display so it's not as distracting. Not to mention all the extra features they built in, like a trackpad, scroll wheel, volume plus brightness controls, and all kinds of other stuff that honestly might feel like overkill. Where the thinness comes back to bite Samsung a bit is the speakers. The Pixel gets louder and sounds fuller, but I think Samsung gets the speaker layout right. Google puts a speaker on each half of the phone, while Samsung puts both on one half. I actually prefer Samsung's layout because on the Pixel, when holding the phone in landscape, you'll always end up blocking at least one speaker. On the Galaxy, I can hold it like this, and both speakers are fully exposed. Let's talk software. The Pixel has that classic, charming Google vibe. Simple, clean, easy to pick up and just use, but it can feel a little locked down at times. For example, cover and main screen layouts are tied together. You can't have separate setups. Whatever you arrange on one screen appears on the other. Straightforward? Yes. Flexible? Not so much. Now, there are a few foldable specific things that I think Google did really well. First, the quick settings actually takes advantage of the larger screen with the split layout design. On top of using it as a camera preview for your subjects, the Made You Look feature for the cover display is a game changer for parents like myself. And the auto split screen is a nice touch too. Clicking an address in an email will automatically open Google Maps right beside it. You can run a total of 2 apps at once with an extra video in a pop-up. But that's as far as multitasking goes on the Pixel. I do want to mention that split screen orientation is tied to how you hold the phone. It'll only do side by side in portrait, top and bottom in landscape. You can't change that. At first, I thought it was a little weird because Samsung gives you that option, but then I realized they probably did this to make sure the crease doesn't cut awkwardly through apps. Samsung, on the other hand, goes all out and feels more power user friendly. You can use 3 apps at once, which is whatever, but the one thing I think the Pixel desperately needs is some form of a floating window. It's such a killer use case for that big screen. I love being able to quickly pull up a small chat, calculator, social media, authenticator, pretty much anything without leaving what I'm doing. What's cool is that you can flick them off to the side to keep them out of the way and bring them back whenever you want with a tap. Honestly, please copy this, Google. The biggest multitasking flex for Samsung has to be that it lets you play audio from multiple apps at once. On most phones, it pauses one once you start another. On the Fold, I can watch YouTube and a streaming app both at the same time. On top of that, you can control the volume of each app individually and even play one app's audio through earbuds and the other through the phone's speaker. Is it overkill? Yes it is, but at the same time, I can see a sports fan loving this. Google gets a lot of flack for their chipset, but Tensor G5 has been really solid for me. I don't have any real complaints when it comes to everyday performance. It's not going to beat the Snapdragon in the Fold 7 on raw power. We all know that by now, but in day-to-day use, you're not going to notice unless you're heavily gaming or running emulators. Even Call of Duty Mobile, for example, runs identical on both devices. From my typical battery testing, usage is very similar across most tasks, which is surprising considering the bigger battery on the Pixel. The only major difference is with video recording, where the Fold 7 is noticeably more efficient. First 4 days were pretty rough, but standby drain on the Pixel has settled in about 3 to 4% overnight now, which is roughly the same as the Fold 7. Ultimately, as long as you're not recording tons of videos, I found that the Pixel tends to outlast the Fold 7. When it comes to pictures, it's a lot closer than I was expecting, but the Pixel just feels more consistent. It has a longer range zoom and, in my opinion, takes better pictures of my daughter, which is like 80% of my camera roll these days. I definitely prefer the video quality on the Samsung though. Straight out of the phone, it just looks a lot better to my eyes. Neither of these cameras are wowing me like their flagship versions, which is a shame considering the price tag, right? So if I had to pick one, I gotta give the edge to Samsung. This is Google's second shot at a foldable. Samsung basically pioneered this entire space and have 7 years of experience under their belt. So it's understandable that they'd be ahead in a lot of ways. That doesn't mean everyone should pick the Fold 7 over the Pixel Fold. There's plenty of you out there, I've seen your comments, that can't stand Samsung software and would easily pick the clean, get out of your way experience that the Pixel offers. Multitasking isn't as advanced, but not everyone wants or needs to run 4 or 5 apps at once. It's also $200 cheaper, and better dust protection is a huge selling point too, especially if you spend a lot of time at the beach, for example. Both phones are impressive in their own way. Samsung nails the feature-packed power user experience in this insanely thin package, while Google delivers a smart, no-fuss foldable that just feels more solid in the hand. It all comes down to what kind of experience you're after. Anyways, let me know in the comments which one you'd pick and why. Thank you so much for watching. Until the next one, I'm out of here.